All right, I've got another juicy one for you all today. We're talking a beefy, control-focused character who never casts a single spell. They can tank, they can support, and above all, they're going to lock enemies down with athletic prowess and some mundane adventuring gear. It's awesome. I hope you'll stay and check it out. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4 I like to do deep dives into character builds for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them and theorycraft about them, not so that I can tell you the right or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that's both fun but also powerful to play. So if you also enjoy creating characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you are just into theory crafting, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and I'm so glad you're here. So thanks for watching. My name's Colby. I love building control-focused characters, but more than that, I love building control-focused characters who aren't spellcasters, because spell-based controllers are easy, right? Step 1, cast Hypnotic Pattern or Wall of Force. Step 2, question mark. Step 3, profit, right? But control characters who aren't using magic to control their enemies, but instead are using their bodies or their wits or their muscles, I don't know. It feels a little more challenging and a little cooler to me personally. Like the Coldcaster build from a few months ago, for example. Okay, fine, they use some spells, but the spells weren't the main way that build was controlling enemies, right? Maybe a better example would be the detective build that was all about locking your enemies down via manacles and the thief's fast hands feature. That one was a blast to build, but I realized something after I finished that particular build actually. There is a much stronger way to lock enemies down with simple adventuring gear, as several of you pointed out to me in the comments. Yes, we are talking about the humble chain. Chains in D&D 5.5 are amazing. Better than the net, better than the rope, and yeah, better than the manacles. This sweet little piece of gear says that if we take the utilize action and succeed on a lowly DC 13 athletics check, we can restrain an enemy. Restrain. For those who need a reminder, the restrained condition is a nasty one. It reduces speed to 0, causes attacks to be made with disadvantage, and then attacks against a restrained target have advantage. It also gives disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. That is some mighty fine shutdown power that isn't too hard to pull off, with one little caveat. You can only do this chain trick if the target is already either grappled, incapacitated, or restrained first. That makes things a bit more complicated, yeah. Oh, and also, they have to have legs. This is the weirdest verbiage. Quote, if the creature's legs are bound, they're restrained. But there's nothing in there telling us if there's anything else we need to do in addition in order to bind the legs. So I guess we just have to say that that's what we're doing when we make the athletics check. But also, there's nothing here that tells us what happens if the legs aren't bound. Like, what if they don't have legs? I guess chains are just useless against oozes and slimes and other legless entities. Fortunately though, the vast majority of enemies in D&D do, in fact, have legs. So the question then is this: how would we build a character who had a really high chance of inflicting one or more of these conditions, right? Grappled, incapacitated, restrained, and who could then, on the same turn, whip out a chain and restrain their enemy with it. Ideally, building the character in such a way as to nearly guarantee success on that athletics check, and ideally decreasing the likelihood of their foe escaping once they're all wrapped up. I've got a pretty good idea on how I would do it. Want to dive in? I am proud to present D&D build number 258, the one-man chain gang, links to the fast. The strongest link, thick, chainy. Chain reaction, break, rattle, and hold. The restraining order, fasten the furious. The rage cage. Thanks as always to the fantastic suggestions from everybody on Discord. Today, I think I'm going with the suggestion from Loose Leaf, Malice in Chains. Mostly because I just want an excuse to sing some grunge in the outtakes. All right, huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for the build this week. Man, he's so good, and I swear he gets better every week. I love this chain, whip. You can just feel that energy, right? That movement. Oh, it's so good, the motion. If you'd be interested in following Randall to check out the other stuff that he has done, or to potentially reach out to try and commission him to create some art for you or even your entire party, I will put links in the video description, as always, on how to do so. But first, you love D&D. Of course you do. But I'm willing to bet that you probably don't get to play as often as you'd like, whether because you're a forever DM, or because your regular game night gets canceled once in a while, or because you're in between groups at the moment, or because you're just an addict who can never get enough. Well, if any of those things are true, then boy, oh boy, are you going to love today's sponsor, Obvious Mimic. I am so happy to have Obvious Mimic back as a sponsor today. It's been a minute. I think the last time they sponsored a video was when their latest solo D&D adventure, The Streets of Port Noir, was in its crowdfunding era. And great news, it more than funded, of course it did, and now it's ready for release. So, in case you didn't know, yes, Obvious Mimic specializes in making solo D&D adventures, as well as a fantastic t-shirt line, actually, like this Red Dragon Lodge beauty that I'm wearing today. I actually get a lot of my t-shirts from Obvious Mimic, but yes, they have several fantastic solo adventures available in their library, and the latest, The Streets of Port Noir, looks like it's going to be the best yet. It's an investigation-heavy, hard-boiled adventure that has you navigating a criminal underworld, recovering stolen property, and saving a city in the process. As with all of their solo adventures, Port Noir has you bringing your own character to the game, taking your own path, making decisions with real consequences, rolling dice, gaining loot, leveling up, and progressing the story. All you need is the book, and maybe some dice. It's over 200 pages long, by the way, but yeah, no minis or maps required, and it is just the perfect way to try out new characters and play the game that you love all by yourself, when playing by yourself feels like the best or maybe only option. One thing I really love about the set of adventures that Obvious Mimic has created, it's that you could actually play a character all the way from level 1, starting with their first adventure, the Wolves of Langston, and then just progress through each of them, stringing together a nice little solo campaign, Crystals of Zaleth, Secrets of Oki Island, Mystery of Witchhaven, and then by the time you get through the Streets of Port Noir, assuming you can survive, because yeah, death is a real possibility with all of these, you'd have a nice juicy like level 6 character. This could even be a great way to like build a backstory for a character that you're planning on playing in a longer campaign that might not start at level 1, right? Or of course, it'd be a great way to take one of your dozens, or if you're like me, hundreds of builds that you've made that you haven't had a chance to actually play in game and take them for a test drive. So please do yourself a huge favor and go check out The Streets of Port Noir and all the other great stuff that Obvious Mimic has to offer. Grab something that will give you hours and hours of entertainment with high replayability for about the cost of a movie ticket. I am supremely confident that you will not be disappointed. When you do check them out, I'd appreciate it if you'd use the link that's in my video description and the pinned comment so that they know I sent you. Thanks. And big thanks to Obvious Mimic. I am such a fan of your guys' stuff and I really appreciate your support of the channel. Okay, let's get back to the build. All right, starting off at level 1 for our starting class, I want to start off the build today as a barbarian, actually, for a couple of reasons, but they mostly have to do with survivability. One potential weakness of this build, as we're going to see today, is that it's going to be a little bit squishy. Or at the very least, it's going to be pretty easy to hit. Our AC is going to be a bit of a problem. As a result then, I'd love to start with the highest hit die class in the game and get all 12 of those hit points at level 1, right? But also, barbarians have a couple other tools to help them with durability, as we will see, and one thing that'll help us out tremendously with our primary chain tactic. One note. I don't usually talk about skill proficiencies, but do be sure to grab proficiency in athletics here at level 1, whether from your class or your background. As for our species, I have 3 to recommend actually. ASMR would be great primarily for the potential to frighten enemies, which will give enemies disadvantage on skill checks, right? One problem here though is the bonus action that it would require to frighten them with that necrotic shroud, right? And the fact that it only lasts for 1 round. Worth considering still. I also really like Tortle on this build for the aforementioned AC challenge that we're going to have. You know, as a Tortle, you'd get a flat 17 AC. That would be pretty dang nice for us. But my favorite pick here is going to be Goliath, not for the reason that I usually take Goliath for a little extra damage or to knock an enemy prone, but because at level 5, they get to grow to large size, and that will be very useful for us. Since I don't care about damage that much then for the build today, I'm gonna say, take Cloud Giant for our ancestry here, which would give us a nice 30-foot teleport that we could use as a bonus action, proficiency bonus times per day. Always useful. Stone Giant, on the other hand, would be another really great pick to help reduce damage dealt to us with our reaction. If you don't think that you'll need to be teleporting much, but we will have a defensive move using our reaction a little bit later, so it gets a little redundant. As for our background, as always, I say, go ahead and take an old one or customize a background if you can, but if you can't, any of the official backgrounds that give the tough origin feat will work, right? I'm talking Flaming Fist Mercenary, Rashemi Wanderer, Farmer, because yeah, that's the origin feat that we want most, I think, on this build, tough, since it gives us just an extra 2 hit points per level, and yeah, we're probably going to need those with how often we are likely to get hit on this build. As for our ability scores, I assume we go the point buy method as always and say start with a 15 strength, take a +2 there, a 13 constitution and a +1, a 14 dexterity, and then a 13 wisdom. I would love to get that con and dex and frankly even wisdom a little bit higher if I could, but we're going to need all of them for multi-classing purposes among other things, so here we are. As for starting equipment, I would say grab scale mail and then either 2 light weapons or like the sword and shield route. But we are going to be switching probably to like unarmed and unarmored next level. Above all, be sure to grab a few chains, right? Of course, they're only 5 gold each, and it will be nice to have at least a couple of backups on the off chance that an enemy you restrain with them is actually strong enough to burst them, right? As an aside, see if you can convince an ally to take the mending cantrip to help out with that potential scenario. But anyways, yeah, I think I'd personally just plan on starting at level 1 as kind of a regular old, probably dual-wielding barbarian, but that's going to be the best damage route for us because we do get, as a barbarian 1, weapon masteries, right? And 2 light weapons are great if you can get 1, say, with Vex, so like a hand axe or a short sword, and then Nick, so the scimitar, most likely, so that we could get 2 attacks on our turn without burning our bonus action, right? As a barbarian, 2 attacks are always better than 1, since we also get Rage, of course, which says that twice per long rest and recovering 1 use on a short rest, we can use a bonus action to enter a rage state for 10 minutes that does so many wonderful things for us. It adds 2 damage to our strength-based attacks, but more importantly for this build, gives us resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, which is most of the damage we'll be subjected to in-game, especially at like tier 1 and tier 2 of play, right? So that will help tremendously with our survivability. And then, maybe best of all, Rage gives us advantage on our strength saving throws and our strength checks. Remember, in order for us to restrain an enemy with our chain, we simply need to succeed on a DC 13 athletics check. That DC does not change based on like the enemy's CR or their size or anything, which feels a little crazy to me, but I'm not complaining. Again, that enemy just already needs to be grappled, restrained, or incapacitated. No mean feat, I suppose, and have legs. So yes, an athletics check is a strength check, meaning that while raging, we'd have advantage on that chain check, and considering that we'd have a +5 to that check right at level 1, right? Getting advantage means we will rarely fail that check. Okay, finally at Barbarian 1, we get Unarmored Defense, which says that if we're unarmored, our AC equals 10 plus our Dexterity modifier plus our Constitution modifier, which would be a 14 right now. That's worse than where we would be at with Scale Mail, right? But we will need to start using Unarmored Defense next level, probably anyways. Because yes, at level 2, for some reason, our Barbarian has decided to do some work on themselves. They've got this rage issue. And frankly, it's really disruptive in their life. Maybe their anger management, or lack thereof, caused them to hurt a loved one. Maybe they were inspired by a guru or a mentor who showed them that their rage is a good thing if it can be harnessed, channeled, and focused rather than allowed to simply run rampant, unchecked, right? Regardless of your reasons, yes, we are taking monk levels. Now, that's right, we are going to be a strength-based monk, a strunk, a barbonk, for reasons that will become clear very soon. For now, As a monk 1, we get, unarmored defense again first. This time, though, it's with dexterity and wisdom, and it doesn't let us use a shield. And that is not going to be as good for us as dexterity and constitution from barbarian, right? So we'll stick with the barbarian's version of it. But sure, if you'd rather have a higher wisdom than constitution for the build, then you could use this version of unarmored defense. And there's at least one good reason for doing so, as we will get into a little later. But yeah, as worried as I was about our squishiness, I decided to favor Constitution here, right? Anyways, we also get Martial Arts at Monk 1, which says that so long as we are only wielding monk weapons, that's simple weapons and martial melee ones with the light property, and also that we're unarmored and unshielded, we get a few nice benefits. So that means we're probably dropping our armor at this point and taking a hit to our AC, but maybe not. More on that in a sec. Anyways, those martial arts benefits include being able to make a single unarmed strike as a bonus action using our martial arts die, d6 for now, for the damage of our unarmed strikes, and using dexterity instead of strength for our unarmed strikes, including our grapple, DC, though we don't care about that so much as a stronk. Yeah, I like bonk better. You know who I like even more than bonks, though? Don't make a bonk joke. Don't do it. My channel members and patrons, let me give them a quick shout out. You guys, thank you so much for your support. It means the world to me. I couldn't do what I do without you. So thank you. If you're not a channel member, I would love it if you'd consider becoming one. There's a button down there, it says join. Click on it or check out the Patreon link in my video description. It'll tell you about all of the perks that I offer to all of my channel members, including access to the library of write-ups that I do for all of my builds, so that you can more easily recreate them yourself, access to the community Discord server, and access to the live monthly Q&A hangout sessions that we have. I give all of my perks to all of my channel members, regardless of the level they sign up at, so long as it's silver or higher. It's only like a couple bucks a month. And I just ask that you pay what you feel it's worth and what you think you can afford. But if you're not interested in supporting the channel in this way or don't think that you can, that's fine. I'm really glad that you're just here watching, liking and subscribing, especially. Those are great ways to support too, so thank you. All right, at level 3, we would be a monk 2, and that means we get monk's focus, our focus points, right? We get 1 per monk level. They reset on a short rest and can be used to do one of 3 things for now: patient defense to disengage as a bonus action, or disengage and dodge if you spend a focus point; step of the wind to dash as a bonus action, or disengage and dash for a focus point; and flurry of blows, our favorite, to make 2 unarmed strikes as a bonus action instead of 1 for a focus point. And here's an interesting and important point that I myself often forget about. When it comes to these focus abilities, there's actually no restriction on being unarmored and unshielded, right? So if you feel pretty confident that you'll have the focus points that you need to flurry of blows as often as you want, for this build, admittedly, that's pretty unlikely at these early levels, but maybe after you get a few more monk levels and a few more points, then feel free to use some armor and maybe even a shield. That might be questionable, but it would help our survivability tremendously. Especially since we get uncanny metabolism at this level as well, which lets us recover our spent focus points once per long rest when combat breaks out. Heals us a little bit too, it's super nice. And then finally we get unarmored movement at this level, which increases our move speed by 10, again if we're unarmored and unshielded. So yeah, one more reason to potentially forego that armor. Though, as a Goliath, we've got 35 feet of speed innately. We might not need more than that most of the time, but you make the call. At level 4, we would be a monk 3, and that means we get deflect attacks, which is a really great defensive ability that I alluded to earlier. It says that when we get hit by an attack that deals bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage, our specialty, right, with rage, we can use our reaction to reduce that damage by a d10 plus our dexterity modifier and our monk level. And coupled with our resistance from rage, honestly, we should really just be laughing at bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage at this point. So, maybe that armor isn't super important after all. Also, if we reduce the damage from the attack to 0, almost guaranteed for us when we can use this, right? We could spend a focus point to redirect it, forcing a dexterity save from an enemy to deal 2 times our martial arts die plus our dexterity modifier in damage to them. But then we also get our subclass at this level, of course, and who knows what we'll be going with? I do. Actually, there are 2 that would work great for this build, I think. First, Warrior of the Elements, so that we could get the Cold Caster feat eventually, and then reduce enemy saving throws like we did with that Frozen Fist build that I linked to earlier. But A, I've already done that, and B, I think there's one that works even better for this build, especially at higher levels, and it's, yes, Mercy. Probably still the most mechanically potent monk subclass, at the time of this recording at least, in my opinion. But at this level, Mercy monks get 2 features. Hand of Harm says that once per turn, when we hit with an unarmed strike and deal damage, we can spend a focus point to add extra necrotic damage to the attack equal to our martial arts die plus our wisdom modifier. Probably not something I'd plan on doing a lot of on this build, at least maybe not until later, but nice if we need a little more oomph on a hit. And then we get Hand of Healing, which says that either as a magic action and a focus point, or by replacing one of our unarmed strikes when we Flurry of Blows, we can touch a creature and heal them for our martial arts die plus our wisdom modifier. Really wishing we could have afforded a 14 wisdom. At level 5, we would be a monk 4, and that means we get Slow Fall, which lets us use our reaction to reduce falling damage that we take by 5 times our monk level. So fun and cool. Now you're a bonk who does parkour. Bonkour? I'll stop now. We also get a feat here, of course, our first general feat. And yeah, we're taking Street Justice. The best feat in the world for this build that's new from the Heroes of Faerun book, right? I couldn't wait to use this in a build when I saw it because, yeah, it's going to raise our strength by 1 to 18. And then it says that our allies have advantage on attacks against our targets that we've got grappled. And, you know, as a character who's building around control and tankiness and less on damage, so we're pretty much a support character, right? I really like this for our team. But then also, when we use a chain, manacles, or a rope to bind a creature, we get to add our proficiency bonus to the DC for them to escape. That is so awesome. Remember, they have to succeed on an 18 acrobatics or a 20 athletics to get out of that chain. Now it's 20 and 22 respectively, and it's just going to scale up with our proficiency bonus. It's fantastic. I mean, late game, a DC 26 athletics check, not a ton of monsters are going to make that easily. And we're actually going to make it even worse for them in a couple of levels. This feat also says that our intimidation checks don't have disadvantage against enemies who are hostile to us. It might be useful when you're trying to get someone to cough up the truth or stand down. Yay, utility. Don't forget, we do get Goliath large form here if we want Goliath, right? At level 5 now. This lets us use a bonus action to go to large size for 10 minutes. And also gives us advantage on strength checks if for some reason we're not raging. Maybe we're out of rage uses or whatever. Is this on round 1? Maybe not even worrying about rage, depending on how healthy we are. Anyways, at level 6, we would be a monk 5, and that means we get extra attack, which lets us make 2 attacks with our action instead of 1 if we're taking the attack action. That's nice, potentially. And hey, if we're using weapons sometimes and are still going with like a Nick setup, we could have 5 attacks on our turn right now. It's pretty sweet when rage damage at least gets applied to all of them, right? I need to make a damage focused bonk. Don't worry, it's still on the to-do list. More importantly for this build here at this level, yes, we get the very divisive stunning strike, which says that when we land a monk weapon or unarmed attack, we can attempt to stun our enemy until the start of our next turn, once per turn. They do get to make a constitution save against our wisdom-based DC, though, so yeah, that's pretty rough. One more reason to potentially favor wisdom here, though. And you know, with rage, deflect attack, and the tough feat, I'm tempted to retcon things here and tell you to take a 14 wisdom instead of constitution at level 1. Definitely consider it. But even a 14 wisdom isn't great, and targeting the enemy's constitution saving throw exacerbates the issue, right? I'd still plan on using Stunning Strike when I felt pretty confident that the enemy didn't have a great constitution saving throw, but, you know, that's not going to be changed by a wisdom modifier of +2 instead of +1, you know? Anyways, don't forget that our martial arts die does scale up to a D8 now, and that would affect both our unarmed strikes, but also our monk weapon attacks, right? So if we're using weapons, even D6 weapons, or lower for that matter, they'd scale up to a D8. All right, at level 6, it is time for not our damage report, but how about a control report? What are our tactics like here for trying to lock enemies down? Why did I take all these monk and barbarian levels? Well, on round 1, we've got to rage to get all of our ragey perks going, or potentially use our Goliath large form, right, as a bonus action instead if we're up against huge enemies, like I've mentioned. And then with our action, we're probably just running up and either trying to grapple an enemy or just making some attacks against them. Heck, maybe we'd even want to use weapons on this first round to soften the baddies up and throw them off our game. But on round 2, we start going into lockdown mode. With our bonus action, we would flurry of blows against our enemy, but we've got options for what we want to do with all of those unarmed strikes, right? We could either attempt to just straight up punch them and add a stunning strike if we connect, and then if we miss that first attack or if they succeed on their save against stunning strike, we'd simply try to grapple them with our second unarmed strike. And, for those who might need a reminder, remember this is how grapples work in 5.5, right? You make an unarmed strike and the enemy just makes either a dex or a strength save against our grapple DC, which is affected by our strength for everyone but monks who can use their dexterity, but we're not going to, right? So right now, we have a pretty respectable DC of 15 for the enemy to avoid the grapple. Once they're grappled, then they have to use their action to make an athletics or acrobatics check against that same DC in order to try and escape. Anyways, the safest bet for us here would probably be to just try and grapple them with our first unarmed strike, and then if they fail their save, great, give them a nice knee to the face while they're in a headlock with the second unarmed strike, right? But then if they succeeded on that first save, no worries, just try again. Even though they do get to make a strength or dex save to avoid being grappled, since we've got 2 attempts at it, I like our chances. Assuming we've got them grappled, then with our action, we would simply, take the utilize action to wrap them up with our chains. We need to make a DC 13 athletics check, and our plus to athletics right now is a +7, and we've got advantage. So as long as we don't roll below a 6 on 2 chances, we'll succeed. For the record, that's about a 94% chance of success. I like those odds. Of course, this is assuming that we had them grappled or stunned in the first place, and there is a solid likelihood of that happening now, and assuming they have legs. But if there are no legged enemies on the battlefield, good news, we're a raging bonk with 5 attacks that will deal 1d8 plus 6 or plus 2 each hit. Not a bad plan B. Anyways, assuming legs, our enemy will have to use their action to even attempt to get out of the chains. And they'll likely fail, so they might just resort to being an immobile loser who makes all of their attacks with disadvantage. If they're a melee enemy, they'll be worthless. And even if they're not, all attacks against them have advantage, so they are not going to last long anyways. On subsequent rounds, we can just rinse and repeat. Find another legged enemy, or if our primary target managed to escape, whoop, back in the chains you go. Or sure, feel free to lock one enemy down and then just pull out your weapons and help your team mop up the rest. Super fun, super versatile, super effective. I love it. Where do we go from here? Well, at level 7, we would be a monk 6. That means we get empowered strikes so that our unarmed strikes can deal force damage if we want. And then as a mercy monk, we get physician's touch, which is absolutely the main reason why I wanted to go mercy for our subclass. This says that when we use Hand of Healing, we can also cure the blinded, deafened, paralyzed, poisoned, or stunned condition on the creature that we heal. Really potent when we need it. And no extra resources required, right? But best of all for us, when we use Hand of Harm now, we can also give the creature the poisoned condition until the end of our next turn. And while sure, lots of enemies are immune to the poisoned condition, many more are not. And inflicting poisoned, just by landing an attack and spending a focus point, no saving throw allowed, right, is fantastic. Since it causes all of the enemy's attacks to have disadvantage, which they might have anyways if they're restrained, but more importantly, causes all of their ability checks to be made with disadvantage as well. And what do they need to get out of our chains? Make an ability check against a super buffed DC. So this is incredible for us. They ain't never getting out of those chains. Okay, at level 8, now that we've got Physician's Touch, Stunning Strike, and a healthy handful of focus points, I might want to leave Monk for a little bit. You certainly don't have to. There are lots of good reasons to stay, both defensive and offensive, and I wouldn't blame you for doing so, but I think I'd want to go back to Barbarian for a little bit for a number of reasons. First off, because at level 8, we would be a Barbarian too, and that means we get Danger Sense to give us advantage on dexterity saves. That's nice for defense. And then Reckless Attack so that we could potentially just have free advantage on all of our strength-based attacks if we were willing to give enemies advantage on their attacks against us. Unlike most Barbarian builds, I definitely wouldn't be planning to use Reckless Attack like all of the time. Definitely not when we're trying to grapple and chain, right? We might not even be making any attacks in that case. But if we're trying to make attacks on our turn, whether because the enemies just can't be restrained for whatever reason, or we just feel like changing up our tactics once in a while and going ham on the baddies, having advantage is going to make a big difference for our damage. And also, if we're planning to try and land a Stunning Strike, right? We gotta hit them first. So that'll improve our chances even if we're still trying to focus on control. And frankly, if we're going unarmored and sitting at a 14 AC, I mean, giving enemies advantage isn't going to increase their hit chance against us by that much at this level. They're hitting us anyways. I'm definitely relying more on our damage resistance, our big pool of hit points, and deflect attack to stay alive over just not getting hit very often, right? I don't mind trying to soak up enemy attacks. It is one way I support my team, by sacrificing my body. But then at level 9, we would be a Barbarian 3. That means we get Primal Knowledge to give us some nice additional utility, potentially letting us use our Strength modifier for acrobatics, intimidation, perception, stealth, or survival checks if we're raging. Pretty sweet, if we've got the rage to spare, right? But more importantly, we would get our subclass here. And that's the main reason I wanted to come back to Barbarian. The way I see it, there are two best options for this build. First up, World Tree. My highest ranked Barbarian subclass, according to my tier ranking video that I did a little bit ago. World Tree Barbarians are just great for both survivability and control, and that's kind of what we're all about with this build. That said, the additional control wouldn't come until 6 levels in to Barbarian, and I'm not sure that I'd want to make that big of a commitment with this build personally. The temporary hit points for you and or a friend that World Tree Barbarians get right at level 3 are nice and worth considering by themselves, but I think my preference for this build, actually, would be the formerly known as Path of the Totem Warrior option, the Wildheart Barbarian. For one simple reason, and it's not for the Animal Speaker feature that they get here, which lets them cast the Beast Sense and Speak Animals spells as rituals, potentially useful once in a while, but no, it's for the Rage of the Wilds feature, which lets them, when they rage, gain the aspect, essentially, of an animal, right? Eagle, so they can disengage and dash as a bonus action, not really necessary as a bonk. Wolf, to give your allies advantage on attacks against enemies within 5 feet of you, really great, but also not very necessary on this build between our chains and our Street Justice feat. And then the most famous option of all, Bear, which increases our damage resistances. It's not as good as it used to be in 5e, but it still gives us resistance to everything except Force, Necrotic, Psychic, and Radiant damage. And at this level and beyond, we start to see more and more enemies doing other types of damage, right? More than just bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. So it felt like a good time to keep an eye on our defenses so that we could stay alive while we keep taking hits to the face and locking our enemies down. Okay, at level 9, it is time for our next control report. Since last check, our tactics haven't really changed at all. We've simply increased our survivability, our likelihood of landing our attacks, and added a sweet poison ability to help ensure that our enemies stay chained once we've got them wrapped up. I mean, yeah, imagine needing to make what would be a 21 acrobatics check or a 23 athletics check now and having to make that roll at disadvantage. I have to believe that the vast majority of enemies are going to decide to just stay restrained unless they're melee only and no one is around. And even if they decide to try and break out, they gotta burn their action in the attempt. So even if they succeeded by some miracle, well, they wasted their turn. And you can just wrap them back up again on yours. It is magnifique. And it just keeps getting better. Because at level 10, we would be a Barbarian 4. And that means we get another feat. And I'm actually a little torn on what to take here. On the one hand, I really want to just cap my strength at 20, which will help out almost everything that we want to do. And also so that I can move on to start putting points into wisdom and or constitution, right? On the other hand, I really want the grappler feat. I mean, If we're primarily relying on our grappling in order to set up our chain move, right, it just makes so much sense to go this route. First of all, it would raise our strength to 19. Then it says that we have advantage on attacks against enemies that we have grappled. So now we and our allies have advantage, even if we don't manage to restrain them with our chains, which is nice. Keeps us from having to use reckless attack, potentially. It also says that we can drag grappled enemies at full movement instead of half, which will come in handy. But most importantly, for us, it says that we can both punch and attempt to grapple with a single unarmed strike once per turn. And that's really pretty huge. Before, we'd have to choose if we were going to try and punch and stun, right? Or just grapple. And especially now that we can automatically poison enemies if we land that punch, it just makes more sense than ever to attempt to hit them at least once on our turn, right? We could make that unarmed strike with advantage thanks to reckless attack, and if it lands, attempt to stun them and automatically poison them so that they have disadvantage on their ability checks, and attempt to grapple them all at the same time, right? And if they make their save on both the stun and the grapple, we've still got one more grapple attempt from Flurry of Blows, meaning the likelihood that we'll be ready for the chains when our action rolls around just really improves with the grappler feat. And once they're chained, the likelihood of them getting out of the chains goes way down, since they'd be poisoned, right? It's just perfect synergy, and so I don't think I can pass on that feat, but if you'd rather just bump your strength to 20, go for it. But at level 11, I think we can be done with Barbarian, unless you went World Tree. But do we go back to Monk here, or do we go with a third class? I can see some of you thinking we should consider going Rogue to get expertise, yeah? Doubling our proficiency bonus would essentially guarantee that we would never fail that DC 13 athletics check to wrap them in chains. But guess what? At this level, if we're raging or large-sized, we would have a +8 to athletics with advantage. That's a 96% chance of success. I mean, is it really worth spending a level just to close the gap on that last 4%? That 4% is going to just keep going down as we level. Maybe if you're Will Wheaton, but for everybody else, I think we're fine. Some of you might be thinking we should have gone with 3 levels of Rogue to go Thief so that we could fast hands and use the chain, right? But that's the reason we went Monk. Chains work best if the enemy is grappled or incapacitated first, right? And nobody does that better than a Monk. I think this route is by far the better way to go for chains. Alternatively, we could take a level or 2 in Fighter here. 2-up in fighting would make our Nick attack hit harder, and Action Surge would be pretty dang nice to have if we somehow failed to grapple or stun our target with our bonus action, right? Alternatively, 2 levels of Ranger would get us the fighting style, expertise, some utility, and a few spells that we could use for nice out-of-combat stuff, healing, etc. I honestly like either of those choices here, and if either of them really appeal to you, I'd say go for it. As for me, yeah, I think I'd just as soon go back to Monk. For lots of reasons. More focus points, right? We're potentially spending a lot right now if we're constantly trying to flurry and stun and poison. But there are more reasons than that, so let's explore. As a Monk 7, we would get evasion, so we take half damage on a failed dexterity save and 0 damage on a successful one. Considering that we've got advantage on those as a barbarian, right? That's pretty nice, especially since our dexterity isn't great, and we don't have dexterity save proficiency, right? Assuming we started level 1 as a barbarian. You could start at Monk 1, and our dex saves would be a lot better, but they're pretty good as is. At level 12, we would be a Monk 8, and that means we get another feat and cap that strength at 20. I think my favorite pick here would be Mage Slayer. It's just a nice way to potentially shut down an enemy mage's concentration, and better yet, let us automatically succeed on a failed Wisdom, Intelligence, or Charisma save that we failed once per short rest. More survivability, hooray. Treant Monk would be so proud. Actually, no, he'd be mad that I took this long to take the feat in the first place. At level 13, we would be a Monk 9, and that means we get acrobatic movement, which lets us run up vertical surfaces and across liquids on our turn. Cool if and when you need or want to use it, but that's all we get at this level. Worst Monk level ever, dang it. But that's okay. At level 13, it would be time for our next control report, and since last check, we've capped our strength for even better hit chances, damage, athletic checks, higher DC, etc., etc. Good for everything that we're doing, right? And yeah, we've got a 99% chance to succeed on that athletics chain check now with advantage. It's awesome. Perhaps more importantly, we've added Grappler to get us an increased likelihood of grappling, stunning, and poisoning our target, right? Other than that, we've just continued to improve our survivability and utility, which are always great things. So how would we wrap this build up? Pun intended. Well, at level 14, we would be a Monk 10. That means we get heightened focus, and this ability just felt really important to me to get to. Again, our main move, the chain wrap, right, is the easiest thing that we do. The hardest thing is ensuring that the enemy is grappled, incapacitated, or restrained in the first place, right? Well, heightened focus says that if we spend a focus point for them, patient defense gives temporary hit points, nice. Step of the wind lets us bring a friend when we dash, awesome. But above all, flurry of blows makes 3 unarmed strikes instead of 2, which means one more chance to try and set up the chain move. And between a stun chance and then 3 grapple opportunities, assuming the grappler feat, right? It would be incredibly rare that we don't succeed at least one time with our bonus action. And that feels really nice. And hey, if we manage to get them set up with our very first unarmed strike, great. We can add a little damage with our other strikes while we're at it. Or heck, maybe grapple a second enemy if they're nearby, though I suppose that might make it awkward trying to wrap up the first enemy with a chain if we've got our other hand grappling a second target, right? Makes me wish I would have gone Loxodon or Thri-Kreen. Don't say Simic Hybrid. Don't say it. Their grappling sucks. It does. Don't get mad at me. I don't make the rules. Anyways, we also get self-restoration at this level that lets us just straight up end the charmed, frightened, or poisoned condition on ourselves at the end of our turn. Super nice. And it also tells us that we don't suffer exhaustion from not eating or drinking, so long as we have dew and universe juice, I suppose.
Nothing but the dew of a single ginkgo leaf and the energy of the universe.
At level 15, we would be a Monk 11, and that means we get, as a Mercy Monk, Flurry of Healing and Harm, which is a nice way to help us just save focus points, really, now that we probably don't need them as much. It just says that we can replace every unarmed strike from Flurry of Blows with Hand of Healing if we want, without spending points for it. That's nice if we need to be a backup healer. And, I mean, by the way, I haven't mentioned this yet, but yeah, another main reason for wanting to go Mercy Monk here, right? As a barbarian who can't cast spells if they're raging, but as a character who's playing mostly a control and kind of tanky support type character, I love having the ability to heal in combat as a Mercy Monk with Hand of Healing, since it's not considered casting a spell, right? Super nice. But also with Flurry of Healing and Harm, we can use Hand of Harm without spending a focus point for it. Alas, we can only use these benefits Wisdom modifier times per long rest. So 1 time at the moment. That's kind of gross. It got nerfed from 5e because monks, as we all know, were way too powerful. Am I right? Hey, at least our martial arts die gets a bump up to D10 here. That'll be fun. Moving on, at level 16, we would be a Monk 12, and that means we get yet another feat, and I think I would either just bump my constitution to 16, or maybe more likely do like a wisdom half feat to get wisdom to 14. You could do resilient wisdom, though in a couple more levels we'll have proficiency in all saving throws, so that would be a waste if you're playing the character to 18 or beyond. Otherwise, there are plenty of great options. Maybe consider skill expert to finally get expertise in athletics, but that's pretty much overkill at this point. I don't know. You know what I would love most, actually? A way to deal cold damage with our unarmed strikes so that I could get Coldcaster here, bump our wisdom to 14, and then lower that stunning strike or grapple save. Yeah, I know, Elemental Monk, but I still like Mercy more for this build. Is there a magic item that adds cold damage to unarmed strikes? Could we get someone to cast Elemental Weapon, like on our fist wraps or something? Talk to your DM about that and see if you can figure something out. And honestly, if you can, I'd probably consider doing this, going Coldcaster, a lot earlier. Maybe even before the grappler feat. Anyways, finally for us, at level 17, we'd be a Monk 13, and that means we get Deflect Energy, which is just a really nice upgrade to our Deflect Attacks feature, saying that now we can deflect any damage type, not just bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage. It pairs very nicely with our Bear Barbarian selves. And this then brings us to our final control report. Again, our tactics haven't really changed, I mean, throughout the build, right? It's just that our likelihood of actually pulling it off has continued to increase throughout, as has our survivability, utility, and support potential too. which is perfect for what we're trying to build with this character. So mission accomplished. And yeah, just to reiterate, by level 17, we've got 1 stun and 3 grapple attempts using Flurry of Blows, which will also likely poison the enemy if we hit with that first stun, punch, grapple, unarmed strike, right? That's 4 times that they've got to save to avoid getting wrapped up in chains with our action, which, considering our plus 11 to athletics here and advantage on strength checks, will succeed 99.8% of the time, as long as they have legs. So let's get into some final thoughts here. There's no tier score to report on, so what do we think about this build after all is said and done? Man, I don't know about you guys, I freaking love this one. Big surprise, I know, but it's just another one of those versatile, subtly really powerful builds, I think, you know? A monk barbarian controller who is a pretty decent tank, has some solid utility and backup support, and when need be, can put down some respectable sustained damage. This thing is never gonna get boring to play, surely. And you know what my favorite thing about it might be? Aside from just like the fun flavor and uniqueness of it all, I think it's how strong the control is here without being too strong, right? I mean, I've talked about this before, but sometimes putting super hard shutdown on enemies via those uber potent spells like Fear, Hypnotic Pattern, Wall of Force, etc. can sometimes lead to a DM kind of metagaming their players, right? I don't love nor promote this happening in game, but I can understand when it does. All of a sudden, most enemies are like immune to charm or fear, or they all have teleport, or they all have devil's sight, etc., etc. If you as a player are doing something that kind of just trivializes combat, don't be surprised if your enemies start showing up with lots of immunities and workarounds to what you're trying to do fairly frequently. But to me, with this build, it feels like it'll be a lot less likely. Sure, maybe suddenly all of your enemies are showing up without legs, or with incredibly high acrobatics or athletic skills. But I mean, considering how much we've invested into pulling off our tactic, and that in the end, while restraining an enemy is really great, it's not like a super hard shutdown, right? You're really only doing it to one enemy at a time, and sure, there's a chance of it failing, whether because you just can't get them grappled or stunned, or because the enemy gets lucky and can get out of it. So again, if they do, wasted action, which is awesome. I don't know, it feels to me like it's in that sweet spot of like really good, but not too good. And I love that. And again, if in the end you run into an occasional fight where the tactic just isn't going to work for whatever reason, that's okay. We can still get into the front line, put out some solid damage, take a ton of hits, and even debuff enemies and heal allies while we're at it. It is sweetness, and I really want to try it out, at least in a one-shot sometime soon. I hope you feel the same way, but whether you do or not, that's the build for the week. And so yeah, I hope you had a good time. I love you guys. Thank you so much for all that you do for me and for this channel. It means everything to me. I'm so grateful. I hope that you will have a really great day and a fantastic week, and that you remember that your worth and value does not depend on your performance or on what other people think of you. You are valuable and worthy and loved. I hope that you will do good and be kind, and that I see you again really soon. But until then, take care. Bye. You, my friend, I will defend. And if we change, well, I love you anyway. Every day it's something hits me all so cold. Find me sitting by myself, no excuses that I know. You know, as a child of the 90s, 80s and 90s, I guess, I listened to a lot of grunge in my day, but I was never a huge Alice in Chains fan, if I'm being honest. I was definitely much more of a Pearl Jam fan myself. I listened to a little Nirvana, a little like Soundgarden, but yeah, Pearl Jam was my jam. But Alice in Chains had some good stuff. They were just a little more metal, I would say, than grunge, almost like a hybrid-y kind of thing. Don't have a handful of almonds before you start recording, because I got little almond crumbs trapped in my lips. Psychic. This little almond kernel. I can't. grappled or if you can take one, say with